At the British Library, you've got 3.5 million items of oral history, I believe. How do you possibly collate all that? How do you pull it all together? How do you categorise it, put it into certain sections and what have you? It must be an immense job. Because there'll be things coming in all the time.
Yes, about 150 to 200 hours of new recordings are coming in every month, mainly from a big fieldwork team that I have through National Life Stories, which collects interviews, life story interviews with all sorts of people, from authors to steel workers to architects. So we've got a lot of fieldwork going on, but a lot of that 3.5 million is historic material that's been gathered over the last 100 years. So the first recordings that we have at the late 19th century. And then really oral history gets going after the Second World War. A lot of people beginning to gather interviews on cassettes, for instance, and lots of those are now being archived with us at the British Library. So it's a big job to keep track of everything that's coming in, and we're trying to catalogue and make as much of it available as we can. Gradually also digitising it so that it's available online, but with 3.5 million items of sound in the British Library, then it's a tall order to do all this. So we're always looking at ways in which we can provide quick access to material, and working with partners to try and get them to document things and help us basically to document things better, to make them more easily accessible.
I believe that you've got a project running at the moment with Radio 4 called the Listening Project. What's that about? What are you hoping to do with that?
We've had a number of partnerships over the years with BBC Radio 4. For the turn of the millennium, we ran a major national project called the Millennium Memory Bank, which was broadcast around the country as the century speaks. And this was the first attempt, working with a broadcast partner that we had at the British Library, to do what we'd always wanted to do when I first started doing oral history at the British Library, which is to have a cross-section of people right across the country, lots of different ages, lots of different backgrounds, lots of different ethnicities and interests, all talking about their experiences. We gathered 5,500 interviews then, and I thought that we should try and do something similar, try and catch it up to date a bit. And the BBC had the idea that they'd like to do that, but also do it in a slightly different way, using actually an American model based on an organisation called StoryCorps, which is slightly different from the way that both the BBC, in fact, and oral historians normally operate, in that it's based on the idea of a conversation between two people that actually know each other. So it's not an interview in the oral history sense of the word, it's two people sharing things that they like to say to each other. So it could be about absolutely everything, and in fact in some cases it's not historical or about their past at all, it's about a current issue that they're facing together, whether it be illness or bringing up kids or separation, lots of different stories. So this was launched last March, it's going extremely well. We've got 350, I think-ish, interviews that have conversations I should say, that have so far been archived at the library, and we're expecting to make those available online in the summer. And in that sense it's much more of a sort of 21st century project than the Millennium Memory Bank was, because they're born digital, very well documented by BBC producers, lots of content information, and it means they'll be much more easily, readily available online than the Millennium Memory Bank ones. So it's going to be a fantastic, different from Millennium Memory Bank, but a fantastic snapshot of what's going on in people's minds, and particularly I think it's going to give us important insights into people's relationships, friendships, marriage, how people are actually getting on in 2013.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.